Hey guys, Jacob Dupre here at Sweetwater. Today I'm going to be talking about one of the greatest jazz pianists of all time by the name of Bill Evans. And I'm going to teach you how to unlock your potential in your own playing by using some of Bill Evans' techniques, some of his licks, some of his chordal knowledge. He's a very unique player when it comes to harmony, and he took some things that were done by pianists a little bit before them and then kind of transformed it, turned it into his own thing. So I'm going to show you some of those techniques right now. If you listen to any recordings of Bill Evans, you'll probably notice he likes using triads, but he finds really clever, interesting ways to use them. Triads are really simple. It's just, so this is a C major triad. This is a F minor triad. There are a few different types of triads. But if you take a triad, you can strip it down even further if you just have any two notes, two consecutive notes. So you take the bottom two, C and E in a C major triad, and then E and G. Now you have thirds, right? So I can take those triads and I can plane them up a scale or a mode, right? So if I'm in C major, which is simple to see because it's all the white notes, just take this triad. And so I'm just planing it up that scale, right? I can do the same thing with thirds. So that's the same thing, basically. I just left out that top note. Now, Evans likes to take this and impose it over different types of chords, and of course the chords get more complex, and the scales become a little more chromatic and complex than just a simple major scale. One place where he does this very frequently is over dominant chords. So one that you can do, and actually this is a pretty simple lick to learn in and of itself. If you take the left hand away, so we're not talking about the root chord, we're just talking about kind of what we call the upper structure part of the chord. What Evans would do is something like this. So you have like an A flat major triad. And then just a whole step down, you have F sharp major. So playing those back and forth. And if you can do it in different inversions, that's cool too. A lot of people call that a triad pair, and it's pretty simple to understand. You have two different major triads and you're pairing them together, right? Now, if I take that little right hand lick and I put a basic C7 in my left hand, so 1, 3, flat 7, now I get this. And then I resolved it to 1. So, if you wanted to practice this, obviously, as I say in a lot of my videos, and any jazz teacher will tell you, you got to play it in other keys, right? So it's the triad built off of the flat 6. A flat's your flat 6, and then you go down to the flat 5 triad. This is intervals of a 6, flat 6, interval of 5th, flat 5. So that's where I'm getting those triads from. So now if I want to do that in F, I say, well, I got to find the flat 6 of F. Well, that's D flat. So now I can, and then so on and so forth. I can keep transposing it to the other keys. And around the circle of fifths. So before I explained the altered dominant, the two triads, I showed you just planing a triad over a major scale, right? So you could do it over C, any major scale you want, or again, any scale or mode. If I did it over F minor, that was kind of like a Dorian minor, right? I could do a natural minor, which would have a lowered sixth. But say, I want to use this. Well, Bill Evans must have said that to himself, and he did use it because it was something that he liked to do. And what we call this are scale tone triads, right? And so what you're doing is you're playing a scale, but you're harmonizing it, and you're harmonizing as a triad. So each one of these notes in this triad, I'm essentially playing over that scale at the same time. But when I put all three of those together, I get that sound, right? And that was something that Evans liked to use a lot in his right hand, and a lot of times he would use it to harmonize melodies, but as a solo technique too. One of my favorite solo piano recordings of him is All the Things You Are, and in that one he uses that a bit. He uses triads a lot, of course, but when he gets to the F sharp, sorry, not the F sharp, the F minor, which is the first chord of the tune, right after the intro, and then we're to the tune, right? So when he gets here, gets to the second chord, the B flat minor. See, there's some of those triads, and what he's doing it over a kind of a B flat minor sound, but the sort of root mode we'll say is A flat major. So he doesn't do it quite that much. He doesn't plane over the whole scale. He kind of just stays in this area up here. This is very beautiful sounding. It almost has like a kind of a classical sound to it, right? But when it's paired with, you know, when it's paired with more lush, kind of fleshed out jazz chords, it takes on a new flavor, and it's very useful. So again, practicing this probably seems pretty straightforward, but definitely make your practice a part of all your practice should have exploring as a part of it, right? So don't just do it over major scales, do it over minor scales. If you're trying to say, oh, I'm trying to learn all the wacky modes like you know, harmonic minor and double harmonic minor, what all these chromatic scales, try putting triads over them. Just see what happens. You know, so if you were going to do it over minor chords, you could start here. You can go up a fourth, up again. So again, I'm just going around the circle of fifths and planing them. Also, don't only do root position chords. Try them in different inversions. Now, we've talked a lot about triads, but again, I mentioned thirds, right? So if you just take off that top note of a major triad, for instance, you get a third. And Bill Evans likes to use these as well. Rather than a complete triad, he'll just use thirds. One really cool place where he likes to do this is on a diminished chord. So if we go back to All the Things You Are, in that recording there's actually a spot when he gets to the end, so the end of the tune. That's the very end of the tune. So we go back to that C minor 7. When he gets to this diminished chord, so B diminished, he plays up thirds, right? So the B diminished scale that we're working with is this one. We call that half whole because it starts with whole half because it starts with a whole step, then a half step, and that pattern continues. So it's a symmetrical scale. So all of these thirds are part of the chord itself, where all these other ones are passing tones. When you put those together and you play them up a scale, it sounds really great. You'll notice that those passing thirds, those ones that are in the middle that are not scale tones, chord tones, are rather colorful. So if you just hold them out, they're very colorful, where if you play the other ones, I'm just doubling the notes that are already in my left hand, but these are adding more color. And so that's actually, you can use that as a really cool voicing too if you want. Take those notes, those other notes that are not part of the diminished chord already, and just use them in a voicing. That works really well over dominant chords as well. So again, practicing this, pretty simple. You know, if you want to practice it over diminished chords, well, you can go the circle of fifths with diminished chords if you want. So if we take our triad and we add one more note, what do we get? Now we have a 7th chord, right? Now, and apart from thirds and triads, Bill Evans also likes 7th chords. Specifically, he likes to arpeggiate them, right? In a motion kind of like this. That's a very classic sound of Bill Evans's playing. So what he does when he gets to the 2, what he's doing is he's taking the basic 7 chord, so a B flat minor 7 is this right here, and then he's harmonizing it a 10th above. So a 10th, right? A 10th is a third, but an octave more, right? So if you take a minor third and you send that up an octave, now you have a 10th, right? So if I arpeggiate up this scale, which the root of it is A flat major, and I started on B flat, so I have like a B flat Dorian. If I arpeggiate 7th and I do it in a 10th, so now I'm arpeggiating the basic 7th chord in tenths. I was just moving it down by whole steps. So what he does is he starts the lick kind of like, now that little lick you might notice that's kind of related to the triads we were talking about, that kind of scale tone triad movement, except this time he's doing it with the 7th chord. So this little move right here, all he's doing is just moving, he's just moving the basic 7th chord up the scale. So again, our root scale is B flat Dorian. So he's just taking this and moving it up that sequence of notes, which you could keep going with. Just like I was doing with the triads, remember? Same thing, I'm just doing it with a 7th chord now, so there's 4 notes instead of 3. Again, a little detail, but that's very important. So that lick, again, we get to the end of the tune. So something a little bit like that. It might really be more. So what I'm doing is, so I'm taking that 7th chord, I'm harmonizing in tenths, and I'm starting at the top of it, right? So if I start here, starting here, and then our little move right there over the scale, over the Dorian scale. So again, taking in other keys. One great thing about this lick too, it fits right under the hands. I mean, most people can fit at least the span of an octave in their hand, and this is the span of a 7th. In this case, it's a major 7. In your left hand, it's like a minor 7, right? Now, you can take this and run with it even more, and Evans does in this particular recording. There's one part where he's really just, he's arpeggiating 7ths in the chords in tenths like this through almost a whole 8 bars. And so, for instance, if you were going to do it at the beginning of All the Things You Are, so when I get back to the top of the chorus, you know, if I'm here, so that kind of thing, right? You can play with it, experiment. That's something I'm always doing. I'm always just experimenting and using it. But another thing that Evans did, he uses a lot of triplets, and he likes doing 3/2, right? So in this case, you don't have to just play them as 8th notes. You can play them like this. So what I'm doing is doing like quarter note triplets, right? So triplet, 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 like that. So practice that. You know, you could take that around the circle of fifths like this. And actually, All the Things You Are is a great tune to practice this stuff over because it's so symmetrical. It goes around the circle of fifths in the very beginning. So those first few chords are all moving through the circle of fifths. Just to show you an instance where he uses contrary motion as well as parallel motion, in the beginning of this recording of All the Things You Are, he kind of starts out of time, and it's very cool, and eventually picks up the tempo. But at one point he plays this lick right here. That's really the whole lick. So basically the chords just in that one little spot, we've got G minor 7 going to C7. It's like minor going to dominant. So if you look at this lick, the basic movement of it is going this way, right? Away from each other. Where if it was going parallel, that would be parallel because we have these two triads that are moving together. But in this case, we've got two D minor triads that are moving in contrary motion. And you might notice where they start, if you take these two triads, they start here on a D and an A, but then they're on the same note in unison on the F. But then they're on a D and A again, but they're flipped. Right? So it's kind of like a mirror. So there's logic to that, right? You can see that there's logic in that. So again, if I was going to play this lick kind of more in a parallel thing, I would do like... But in this case, it's... So it's going contrary motion. So aside from panning triads and thirds and arpeggiating seventh chords, Evans does like to do stuff with just solid, good voice leading and treating each note as its own voice, right? So a lot of times this is in a 5-note texture, sometimes maybe 4-note, but probably a 5-note chord. And there's just one little instance of All the Things You Are that I want to show you that demonstrates that great. So when he gets to the end of the tune, once again, so that's the turnaround that gets you back to the top, right? Then you're back to the top. Well, in the beginning, again, when he's taking it kind of slow and giving us the intro, he just does this really cool thing right here. Right? It's so beautiful, and it's very simple. We've really only got about 5 notes going on there the whole time in each chord. But let's break it down. This is just, again, just one instance, but it'll just show you how this kind of intricate, just kind of treating each note as its own voice, and this really smooth voice leading is really effective. Now the basic progression is just A flat major, G7, but kind of like an altered, then C altered, and then back to F minor, first chord of our tune. But what he does is he does some kind of interesting stuff. He turns the A flat major into a dominant, but he's turning into a 13 chord, right? So it's A flat 13. But then what we get, we go from A flat 9, major 9, to A flat 13, but then he drops this F down to an E. So now we have like an augmented chord, right? Hear how those sound different? So you got to look at the voice leading. So if we just focus on the first voicing, and focus on these two, and when that first chord moves, they're moving in contrary motion, right? So it sounds very natural to us, it's very smooth. Then that F goes down. So now we're about to move to G7. Right? Now none of the notes that are moving by really more than a step. Some of them just a half step or a whole step. But it sounds very good, and there's so many different colors just in this. And you just see that the voicing is smooth. I'm not having to move around a lot. It's all under my hands. And then we get back to 1. The last bit of the change, so again we have this G altered chord, sharp 5, sharp 9, which moves to the same chord but on C. And then this E flat right here expands and goes outward, and then we get a flat 9 chord. So again, if you're thinking about it kind of like an orchestrator or an arranger, you're kind of thinking there's two voices that are kind of playing this together, and then they separate. And we get that D flat and E natural. E natural's the third, that E flat, that D flat is the flat 9. But in context, and coming from the whole thing, it's just so beautiful. Thanks for checking out these Bill Evans piano stylings with me. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment below. Let me know what you thought about it. If you have any ideas of your own that everyone else might be interested in, please feel free to comment. And thanks for watching.